Hello and welcome to Tommy Talks TV. I have one singular goal with this show, and that is to help you make smarter decisions so that you can have better relationships. I'd like to start again, like I usually like to do, by saying a very, very big thank you, massive thank you to all of you who have liked and shared and commented on the things that I share. I really, really appreciate you because you're helping us spread the message further faster. So thank you very much indeed. And I particularly want to give a shout out to those of you who follow me on YouTube. I'd really encourage you to click on the subscribe button and also the notifications button so that you don't miss anything that I share. So sometimes you might miss things if you're watching on Facebook, but if you're watching on YouTube and you click the notification button, then you'll never miss anything that I share. So thank you very much for that. Now, as you might know, last week I started talking about 12 questions that you need to ask yourself before you say I do. And I explained to us that, you see, who you marry is really, it's fundamental that you make the right decision about who you get to marry or who you choose to marry, because the person that you marry will affect the course and the quality of your life. It will affect the direction in which your life will head. It will affect how much you enjoy your life. So it's so crucial that you ask yourself the right questions, because when you ask the right questions, then you get insightful answers, and you will know that the main reason why I share all that I share on social media, or share with you on whatever platform, or if I'm speaking in events, I'm all about helping you make the right decisions, helping you make smarter decisions so that you can have better relationships. And there's no better way to unlock your decision making capabilities than to ask yourself insightful questions, or ask yourself the right questions. So that's why I'm sharing these questions with you. So last week I shared 4 questions which you can ask yourself before you say I do. If you did not watch that episode, then I'd strongly encourage you to go back and watch that episode before you dive into today's episode. Today I'm going to start with the 5th question you need to ask yourself before you choose to marry someone, or before you say I do. And that question is this: do we trust each other? And I know for someone, it's like, suddenly you feel like something is, like a weight is sinking to the depths of your heart. But just hear me out here. It's really important, because trust is the bedrock of a stable marriage. There's no getting away from it. Without trust, there is no intimacy. Intimacy is impossible in an atmosphere where trust has been broken. You see, because the truth is this: trust cannot be demanded. It has to be earned. And before you bestow your trust on someone, before you choose to trust that person, they must demonstrate that they are worthy of that trust. And the same thing applies to you as well. So before someone can trust you, then you must demonstrate that you're trustworthy as well. And trust is so crucial in that whole thing of intimacy, because they're two sides of the same coin. When you trust, you're willing to be intimate, and when you're intimate, you're being intimate because you trust that person. So without that whole aspect of trust, it's difficult to be intimate in a relationship with someone. And that's supposed to be, your deepest relationship, and your most intimate relationship is supposed to be the marriage relationship. So trust is earned. It's not something that can be demanded. It is earned, but it can be lost in the fraction of a moment. And while broken trust can be rebuilt, I've seen people rebuild broken trust. Maybe there's been an issue in the family, there's been infidelity, or financial infidelity as well. That's a different type of infidelity. But over time, they've rebuilt that trust. So it can happen, but it takes time. It takes a lot of time, and it's very, very testing to recover what has been lost. So it's really important that before you actually say I do to someone, you ask yourself, whether you actually trust that person and whether they trust you. And the thing is this: trust is built on truth. It's not built on a vacuum. It's built on truth. So when you constantly share with each other in truth, when you relate in truth, then that is what builds the trust in a relationship. But when deception enters a relationship, regardless of how small it is, it tampers with the very foundations of that relationship. And I want you to recognize that, because if you're tempted to tell a little so-called white lie, there are no white lies anyway. A lie is a lie is a lie. But you're tempted to tell some kind of lie, to your partner, because you feel you're protecting them from something, you don't want them to know something, or whatever. When you think about it, at the end of the day, what you're doing is you're tampering with the relationship, or tampering with the foundations of that relationship. if your partner gives you cause to doubt their integrity when you are in a courtship, then you've got to realize that marriage is not going to solve that problem. Marriage will only magnify your distrust of the person that you're in a relationship with. So whatever you do, do not compromise on the element of trust in a relationship, because the last thing that you need is to get married to someone and then you're constantly feeling like you need to be on guard. And this is one area where I find it really, really challenging when I'm counseling couples, people who are married, a partner who they're married, and maybe they suddenly find that there's infidelity in their marriage. And a lot of times when you ask them the question, did you see the signs before you get married, majority of the time, I've got to be honest, majority of the time they say they saw the signs before they got married. So maybe the person was playing around, was not staying faithful to the relationship and all that. And then you ask yourself, if you couldn't trust them when you were courting them, what made you think that they will be trustworthy after you get married? Because marriage is not going to make a person trustworthy. Marriage is only going to make them more of who they are. So if you can't trust them in a relationship, then I don't see how you plan to trust them after you get married. So it's really fundamental that you ask yourself the trust question. Now, it's worth saying here that there are three different types of people when it comes to this whole thing of trust. There are people who are called high trust people. So high trust people are people who are, maybe you could say, too trusting. So because of that, they trust, they believe anything and everything that they are told, and because of that, they easily get hurt because they believe anything you say to them, they just swallow it hook, line, and sinker without checking. But you see, the thing is this: when you enter into a relationship, you've got to start on the basis of you trust, but then you also verify. That was famously said by Ronald Reagan, one of the former presidents of the United States. But you trust, but you verify, and when you do that, that's what makes you a mid-trust person. So you are not you're not lacking in trust, but at the same time, you take your time to make sure you're examining all the evidence, and you make sure that the evidence lines up with what that person is telling you. Because when you do that over and over again in a relationship, then you get to the point that once you're married, you can actually relax, because at that stage, that person has proved themselves to be trustworthy. But if before you get married to them, you just swallow everything they say to you, even though you're seeing the signs, you might be heading for the sort of thing that you don't want to experience in life and in marriage. So it's not the best to be just high trust. You need to be a mid-trust person. Low trust people are people who they find it very difficult to trust anyone. Maybe because of things that they've experienced in their past, maybe they've been hurt in their past, maybe they've been betrayed in their past. So because of that, they find it difficult to trust. So to them, a person is guilty until they're proven innocent. You see, but the thing is this: when someone is a low trust person, then being in a relationship with them can be extremely difficult and emotionally exhausting, because what that means is that they will constantly be reading meanings into everything that you do, everything that they you say and all that. And I've seen cases like that. There was a couple that I counseled many years ago, I remember, where she married a man who was low trust, and I'm not quite sure why he was that way, but he was so low trust that he would not allow his wife to work. He would not allow her to go out unaccompanied. He was constantly calling her on her phone to check where she was, and then not only would he call her, then he would call her neighbors to check that she actually was at home when she said she was at home. If maybe she in church she had a chat with she talked to a man or something, he would get so upset, he would lose his temper. So when you live with someone who is a low trust person, then you can begin to feel like you're in a prison, because they're constantly checking your social media, checking your phone, checking this, checking that. Low trust is a difficult place to be. And I understand that sometimes people get to that place because they've been hurt in the past, but the truth is it does not solve the problem of trust in a marriage. Because I always say to people, you've got to get to a point where you can actually allow them to be themselves in that relationship without having all those super vigilant behavior that makes it difficult for them to actually relax in the relationship with you, because mistrust is a very unhealthy footing for you to try to build a marriage. So it's important that you remember the scripture says in the book of 1 John chapter 4 and verse 18, it makes it very clear that fear and love do not cohabit. So it says there is no fear in love, because perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. So if your relationship is driven by fear, maybe because of bad experiences that you've had that make it difficult for you to trust, then you really need to ask God to heal your heart, and seek for help, for maybe someone who can counsel you and walk through that journey with you, so that you get to a place where you learn how to trust again, so that you can enjoy the fruit of an intimate relationship with someone else. So that's really, really crucial. Can you trust each other? Can you trust each other? If trust is absent, then the death of that relationship is very close behind. It's only a matter of time. So trust is fundamental. So the second question is this: are you committed to each other? Are you committed to each other? You see, and I have to say that I think commitment is, it's almost like an old-fashioned word now. People are so used to moving from one thing to the next new thing that comes along and all that whole concept of being committed and sticking with something and staying with it, it doesn't seem to factor in a lot of people's vocabulary these days. And that's why you find that even with relationships, a lot of times people see them as being dispensable. They change relationships like they're changing socks, constantly. I'm not saying that if you're in a relationship that's not working, you shouldn't break that relationship. That's not what I'm saying, because when you're in a relationship, you're investigating to see whether that relationship will work or not. But at the same time, you need to be practicing your commitment muscles. So if you're currently in a relationship, you've got to recognize the fact that, look, there will always be somebody out there who is smarter, better looking, who is funnier, who is wealthier, or any other kind of ear that you can think about than the person that you're with at the moment. But then, if you've looked at this person and you're convinced that they are the one for you, then that's the point at which you make up your mind to close your eyes to everything else that is happening around you, and you focus on that one person. But you see, if you're in a relationship and you're constantly looking with one eye out there to see whether there's a better prospect going by who you should be with rather than this person, that's a mistake. It's a huge mistake, because it shows that there's a lack of commitment there. You see, and you can't make the best of anything that you're not committed to. If a relationship breaks, it should not be because of your lack of commitment. It should be because you discovered something in that relationship that made it untenable, not because you saw someone out there and you thought, oh, that one might be a lot better than the one I'm with right now. So commitment means that when you've made your choice, you're willing to work through the process and stick with that decision unless you discover something that really makes it untenable. And once you have that kind of heart, then that will be the attitude that you will take into marriage. But if you're in a relationship with someone and they're constantly anything that happens is like, maybe we should break up, or maybe we should not be together, maybe this is a mistake and all that, you need to really think about whether that relationship is for you or not, because it simply means that person is not committed. And if you're constantly having those sorts of anxieties about a relationship, and it's like I probably shouldn't be in this, then you need to ask yourself a fundamental question: is this relationship for me? There's no point being in a relationship if you're not committed to that relationship. You are better out than you are in and pretending to be committed when you're not really committed. So is your heart saying yes to that person is what I'm saying. Because ultimately you cannot force commitment out of someone. They either are committed or they are not. Sometimes people are in a relationship and they're trying to force or drag commitment out of the other person. That's always a mistake. It's always a mistake. Either they're committed to you or they're not. And if they're not committed to you, then you're far better off biting the bullet, facing the pain right now, moving on, letting God heal your heart and finding someone else, than to try to drag them to the altar hoping that after they get married they will be committed to you. Because if they were not committed before you got married, then there's nothing stopping them from wandering out of the marriage after they're married. So commitment is really key, and that's something that I really encourage people to develop in a relationship. Until you are both prepared to go all out for your relationship, the chances of that relationship surviving are very slim. And if either of you is not prepared to have that kind of red hot commitment to each other, then I think you're much better off walking away from that relationship at that point than enduring the dissatisfaction of a lukewarm marriage. So that's really crucial for you to address. Then the seventh question that you need to ask yourself is this: can I be happy if this person never changes? That's a very serious question you need to ask yourself. Can I be happy if this person never changes? Because I found out that one of the most common mistakes that people make when they're choosing a partner is settling for, settling for someone that they're not satisfied with, because they're hoping to change that person into who they want them to be. And that's the worst place you could possibly be in a relationship, because I keep saying to people, your spouse is not a makeover project. When you get married to someone, it should be someone that you're fully convinced in your heart that you love them as they are. Yes, you recognize that they've got flaws, they've got weaknesses, but it's like you're satisfied with them as a person, because human beings are notoriously resistant to change when it is being imposed from the outside. So if you make up your mind that I'm marrying this person, but I'm going to change them this way, adjust them this way, make them this, make them more of that, and the other, and all, because they don't quite fit what I want, but I can try to make them into whom I want them to be, you will find that your spouse will constantly be resistant to that. And not only that, you will be frustrated and they will be frustrated as well. So if you're basing your happiness in marriage on the mistaken assumption that you'll be able to change your spouse, you're setting yourself up for huge disappointment. You really are. So you've got to be honest with yourself, because at the end of the day, the baseline for a successful marriage is that you are both content with each other. Am I saying that that person should never improve or grow? No, that's not what I'm saying. Because as you get married, you both improve, you will learn about each other, you will learn how to love each other better, you will learn how to relate to each other better. So that's all it's all part of normal growth. But if you're thinking that you want to change that person into something that they are not in order for you to be married to them, then you're setting yourself up for absolute disaster in marriage, and that's not what God intends for you. God wants you to have a marriage where you're delighted with the person who you get married to. So you must ask yourself this question, okay? Am I happy with this person as they are? And if they do never change, because you cannot predict what aspects of their life they will change and what aspects they will not change. So if they don't ever change, am I going to be happy married to them? Can I deal with their weaknesses while I'm celebrating their strengths? Because one of the greatest gifts that you can give another human being is the gift of acceptance. Every one of us wants to be accepted. Nobody wants to feel like a project, like, oh, you're in that relationship and your plan is just to make them into somebody completely different, because they will always feel a sense of rejection. So you must give the gift of acceptance before you even begin to talk about maybe tweaks here and there, that you might want the person to improve on. So ask yourself, would I be happy if this person doesn't change? And part of it is establishing what your desires are and what your deal breakers are. Some things are just, oh well, it's nice to have. If they don't have it, it's fine. But some things are absolute fundamental deal breakers. And if you see a deal breaker in that person, on your bike, find your level is what I'm saying, because there's no point in taking the chance that, well, they might change in this area. Be realistic with yourself and look at that person and ask yourself, look, would I be completely happy 10 years from now, 20 years from now, if they're still if this thing still persists in their life? And then if the question is yes, then go ahead, because we all have our weaknesses and we all have our strengths. So marry someone whose strengths you can celebrate and whose weaknesses you can live with. And then the last one I'm going to be sharing with you today is this. And this is a really serious question. Am I ignoring any warning signals? Am I ignoring any warning signals? Warning signals are like alarm bells that tell you, if I get married to this person, it may not end well. Because, you've got to realize that marriage is an unconditional commitment to an imperfect person, by an imperfect person. So you're both imperfect, but you're both making an unconditional commitment to each other. But then you also need to be able to draw a distinction between things that are just superficial flaws, superficial faults, and then things that are fundamental character flaws. So some things are just, faults, maybe someone is, is a bit messy, a bit disorganized, or you think they talk a little bit too much, or they don't talk enough. There are little bits and pieces there and there, here and there. Those are all things that are wrapped up in their character. You have your weaknesses just as well as they do, but those are just superficial faults, or they're always late, for instance. Those are superficial faults, but some things are fundamental character flaws that will affect the quality of your life if you get married to them. And those are the things that you need to be asking yourself, because marriage will not transform a person. It will only make them more of who they are. I think I said that earlier. So if a person is a miserable single, it will not transform them. Once they're married, they will not be transformed into a happy spouse. If they're constantly bickering and complaining and grumbling, they're not going to suddenly become, happy and excited after getting married. If the person is unfaithful as a single, they will be an unfaithful spouse. If a person is selfish as a single, they will be a selfish spouse. They're not going to suddenly metamorphose into a selfless spouse when they get married. If a person is abusive, as when you're in a relationship, they're not going to automatically emerge as an appreciative person, simply because you say I do to them. No. So they're always going to be who they are, and probably even more of who they are. So there is, as I always say to people, there is no magic in the words I do to transform a person's character. And it amazes me that for some reason people take the risk of marrying people that have glaring, serious character flaws, because they just feel, okay, once I'm married, let me just marry them, and we'll find a way to work it out. And these are not minor weaknesses, these are major flaws. So sometimes people ask me, what exactly do you mean by warning signals? So I mean things like chronic unfaithfulness. It's not just one mistake, but you can see over and over again things are happening, and they just have that tendency to not be faithful, or they're verbally or physically abusive before you get married to them, or they're very vengeful, maybe not to you, but you've seen that, if someone hurts them, they will do everything they can to revenge. You should know that at some point in time, you will be on the receiving end of that vengefulness. Or maybe they're chronically irresponsible. They don't take responsibility for their life or their finances. They're always, expecting other people to take responsibility for them and all that. You're getting married to them. You should know that, that's exactly the attitude they're going to carry into marriage. Or other things like, constantly deceiving. They're deceptive, they're violent, or they've got addiction. So it's things like that. The list goes on and on. So you get the picture. They're not going to magically transform after you get married to them. So you've got to face the fact. Face the fact now. Face the fact now so that you don't have to face the music later. That's, and I'll say that again and again. Face the facts now so you don't have to face the music later. Because marriage cannot change another human being. Only God can. Only God can. So the Bible says in the book of Proverbs chapter 22 and verse 3, it says, prudent people see trouble coming and they hide. But the naive walk right into it and they take a beating. So that's a word from the scriptures. Prudent people see trouble and they hide. But if you're just naive, you just go ahead. You see the issue ahead, but you're still heading for it, And that is always a mistake. Always tell yourself, look, that when you see the character flaws in the person, probably what you're seeing is just a small part of it. It's what is known as the iceberg phenomenon, which essentially means that for every unpleasant character trait that you discover in a person that you're in a courtship relationship with, you've probably only seen 10%, and the 90% lies under the water. So ask yourself, this 10%, can you deal with this? If you find out that there's even more of this, because we all put our best foot forward when we're in a relationship. We're not going to put all our weaknesses on display, but when you've seen a little bit of it, and if it looks like something that would really make it difficult for you to enjoy your marriage with that person, tell yourself that it's not going to get better with marriage. You're only going to see more of it in marriage. So be honest with yourself now, so that you don't put yourself in a difficult situation later on. So that's really important. So those are the 8 that I wanted to share with you today. I will finish off next week with another 4. I hope this has helped you. If this has helped you, then please leave me a message on Facebook, on Instagram, or YouTube, or wherever it is you're watching. And if you've got a question you would like me to answer, then head on over to tometalks.com/ask, and I'll answer your question next time. See you next time. Bye-bye.